Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking, who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, this is a special episode, so instead of a regular interview, this will be the panel that I moderated during Gamification Europe 2018 in Amsterdam. We will be featuring Juliette Denny of Growth Engineering, Munch Lam of SelfDrvn, and Stuart-Jones of 3 Radical. The recording starts right after Michiel van Unen, the host of the conference, introduced me to the audience. So, go ahead and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rob Alvarez.
Thank you, Michiel.
Have fun.
That was a lot of fun, yeah. I had a weird experience on the stage for the first time. But today, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to have an incredible experience because we have some fantastic panelists. We have Juliette Denny from Growth Engineering. We have Stuart-Jones from 3 Radical and Munch Lam from SelfDrvn. And I will let them introduce themselves because they know their stuff a lot better than I will ever be able to know what they're doing. So can you give us a very quick intro into where you're at, what you're doing, what your companies are doing?
Yeah, so I'm from the team from Growth Engineering, so hello, my fellow growth engineers out there. And what we do is we try and help large corporates in the main make their online learning a lot more exciting. And so our focus is not only gamification, but also social and also kind of narrative. So we try and basically put in the learning infrastructure for large corporates like HP, BT, to try and get people to love their learning.
That's fantastic, and that's what we're here for, to love what we're doing, right? So Will,
yep.
How's 3 Radical?
Yeah, great. So 3 Radical, those of you that don't know, we're a SaaS gamification software provider. So we've come from a marketing background, marketing heritage, so we're trying to bring gamification initially to marketing customer engagement. Now, one of the things we might talk about, finding, I guess, inbound requests to also apply that in a B2B space as well. So really excited to be here, looking forward to some exciting questions.
We will, and because most of those questions will be coming from you, hopefully. So Munch, how about SelfDrvn? What can you say about it?
All right. Thanks, Rob. I'm Munch from Singapore. So SelfDrvn is actually a gamification platform company that we started in 2015. So we have been building our customer base in Asia since then. Starting this year, we have also have a few customers on board in Europe as well. So I think there's a very interesting comparison between how customers behave and what they expect in Asia versus Europe.
That's fantastic, and that's going to be certainly one of the topics. And something to get started with questions, with a lot of content, which is what we're all here for as well, is we've seen the presentation as well from Marigo, where she was talking about where we were 10 years ago, where we are now in many ways. But what have you seen since then that gamification has been seen as a fad at some point, but where even if some things have gone right or wrong, we're here. I mean, there's a conference about gamification, a vibrant community that I've been able to witness, especially through the podcast and the daily work that I do. How have you seen the industry in these, if you've been 10 years or even less, how have you seen the industry progress, or what has been happening in these 10 years, and where do you see the industry now?
I mean, just in terms of what we're seeing in the learning space, obviously there was a big, leap into some very kind of basic gaming mechanics being put on learning management platforms. And, largely that didn't really work. And I think clients, failed to sort of get, the excitement and the engagement from their learner population. However, speaking from a sort of a growth engineering kind of perspective, I think what we're generally seeing now is that the client base is much more informed with regards to the fact that gamification is more than just badges and leaderboards. And in order for it to effectively work, there needs to be multiple different mechanics going on, but there also needs to be a narrative that's weaved so that you can get that consistency of training. And then finally, gamification doesn't really work without social. And so, if you don't have all of those things, pulling together. So I would say that, it definitely is improving, but I think there is a better understanding of our client base and corporate clients out there that it's not quite as simple as they once thought. But a really well deployed, gamified platform can make massive differences in terms of engagement and, really kickstarting that learner culture. So when done right, it's, very powerful. But
changes lives, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And Will, what about you? What have you seen as, I don't know, beyond the trends and in your experience, what have you seen? How has it changed the perception? And
Absolutely. So I guess a bit of background. So 3Radical was born out of another organization that did traditional digital marketing, so email and social and direct mail, all that sort of good stuff that people were doing 10, 15 years ago. And we really came into the space to say, could we actually boost the engagement rates? Because, if you did it, even if you did an email campaign very well with data, you might achieve maybe 5 or 7% response rates. So we really wanted to take it. We didn't even really realize it was gamification at the time, but we wanted to make something that would be more engaging, that would really boost those engagement rates. And I guess what we have seen over I've been with the company getting on for 5 years now, is over that time, we've definitely seen a sort of validation of this as an approach. All the companies that we go into now say those traditional marketing techniques that are dropping off, so open and click-through rates for email are really sort of suffering. So we are definitely seeing now more inbound requests for us. So in the past, it was very much selling to sort of innovators or mavericks in organizations. So it's obviously quite difficult to pinpoint who those people are. Do they have enough influence to actually sign on the dotted line? So we're definitely seeing that coming in and seeing great results. And I guess the other thing that's kind of interesting is, although we came from a marketing space, definitely seeing a lot more inbound requests from us to apply gamification in other verticals, so B2B, in learning, in staff development. So that's really the sort of trend that we've seen. So whereas before we were evangelizing, as Juliette said, audience is much more informed now. We're actually getting sort of people coming to us to drive engagement.
That's a very, very positive outlook. And of course, we always have to put our feet on the ground, as Marigo was starting to tell us.
So I'll be honest with you that we've probably left a trail of dead bodies. We've definitely got into a lot of different markets. And I guess the interesting thing for us, one of the things we'll talk about tomorrow is some of the verticals where we have seen gamification work after trying a lot of things. And I guess for us, it's about how do you carve out use cases where there are tangible business benefits. Okay, so where we're actually really moving the needle for an organization. And when you've homed in on those, how do we scale that? How do we deliver that to more organizations that have got the same problem?
Great. Munch,
yeah,
how's your experience been?
Okay, so my background is software engineering. So I've been doing programming since age 12. That was 1982. And SelfDrvn is actually the third startup that I founded. And I've seen technology come and go. And I think in the terms of industry analysts called Gartner, they describe the maturing of technology using something they call the hype cycle. So in the hype cycle, all new technology will start with people having very unrealistic expectations of what the technology could do for them. An example being blockchain and AI right now is at the height of that expectation. But what comes next is really a lot of failed experiments, perhaps, because expectations are too high. Many of those projects and all that fail to meet expectations. So you started seeing a lot of high failure rate of projects. And I think that's where gamification is at the moment, based on what Marigo has shared with us. But if the industry, the practitioners could learn from that experience and consolidate what works and what didn't, and also focus on how we could deliver tangible business value. I think gamification as a whole is on the way up again, because I do believe that there is a place for gamification in the business world. I think this whole idea of behavioral science, behavioral economics have gained a lot of traction in the business world. In fact, 2% have won Nobel Prizes for behavioral science. And in my view, gamification is really the user experience aspect of good behavioral science. And because behavioral science work, we can make gamification work.
That's it. I'm sure we can make gamification work. And there was a trend of the things that you were saying. You left a bunch of dead bodies, and you say we've been learning. Juliette has also been learning a lot, and that's one of the great reasons for us to be here and to be sharing this knowledge. I know many times in the industry you have to sign an NDA that says you cannot talk about this to your wife or you'll be going to jail or whatever. But as much as we can share, that's something that helps the community grow. And again, that's one of the reasons I'm here, and that's one of the reasons I do the podcast for, so that we can be sharing these experiences as often as we can, and we can learn from each other. Even again, we could be competing with each other in a very healthy competition. But that's it. These experiences that we're sharing here is something that I think is of great value. And in the sense of sharing, I also shared with the people in social media, and et cetera. I asked them if they had any questions for this awesome panel that we had today. And Chuck Sigmund from Amazon did have a question as well. He said, well, depending on where you're at, there are some organizations that can have some data as well from success cases, et cetera. But there's others who, at least internally, don't have that case. So basically his question was spinning around, how do you make the business case for a company where that company has no data around how gamification works? How do you build that business case for them?
I mean, our client base is large corporates, so we face that question,
daily.
Yeah. And I think the way that we approach it is not necessarily from a gamification works point of view, but more from a broader point of view, which is in and around behavioral science and the way the brain works. And so when we're discussing, learning platforms or learning environments we might put in for large clients, what we're saying is, what have you got now? How many people are actually engaging with the platform? So typically on, learning management platforms or mobile platforms, people might be logging in, 5 times a year if they're lucky. On our gamified platform, it's about 5 to 10 times a week, but on our mobile app, our new gamified learning platform, the Knowledge Arcade, it's up to sort of 14, 15 times a day. So we don't say, let's have a conversation about gamification. We say, let's have a conversation about the platforms that you're using now and the impact that they're having on the organization. And then let's look at how much money you're spending, and let's work, and then going back to the point about behavioral science, learning is not a moment in time, and if we want that knowledge to transfer into behavior, people need to be engaging with that learning platform on a daily basis. And so our conversations aren't about necessarily, is gamification the right thing? It's more in and around, how do we get your budget to work most effectively to change the learning culture and meet your objectives, rather than the solution is gamification.
You're looking for people to actually learn beyond saying that you're using gamification. So again, fighting the whole fad thing that we're doing it because it's the latest and the greatest. Yeah. It's actually getting people to get these results that you're asking from them. I don't know if you had a similar approach.
Yeah, I guess it's about, so for us at 3 Radical, we make sure we hard bake measurability into what we deliver. Because, gamification projects live or fail based on you being able to prove, particularly if people don't have the data, you need to be able to prove the uplift that you've generated. So that's one thing that we really focus on. The second thing is also, talking to Marigo at lunchtime about, when you start a gamification project with a new company, I'm sure they've got a lot of preconceptions about what they want to deliver. They might want to sort of boil the ocean. You have to tie it back to things that are going to move the needle for the business and the company. Okay, so a couple of great examples. One that springs to mind is, I'm sure this has affected everyone in the room, GDPR earlier this year, where overnight people's email databases were wiped out. Okay, so all of a sudden you trying to use email to market to people has disappeared. So how do you cut through that? You can't email them anymore. So, that's a clear business problem. If an organization has lost half of the people it can contact, well, that's going to have a direct impact on bottom line. So it's picking use cases like that where we can apply gamification to it to actually sort of move the needle. So in that case, organizations we worked in there, we've used gamification to give people a compelling reason to opt back into marketing. Okay, so it may be in retail. we use a mechanic in store where there's a clear value exchange. So you get to play a very simple digital game where you might win a digital voucher for that particular retailer. The quid pro quo is you get that reward if you have opted back into email marketing again. Okay. So again, very specific use case. Because we bake measurability into there, we can see how many people are doing that activity, how many people have signed up, how many people have gone on to visit that restaurant or that store within a particular period, 2 or 3 months after that first touch. Okay, so that's the thing. We've heard some great pieces this morning about play testing and prototyping. The one thing that's been missing for me so far is business outcomes and business goals. Be very clear up front how you're trying to move the business for an organisation. Make sure you can prove it afterwards. And then what that allows organisations like ourselves, if we're sort of in startup mode, is to create reference or case studies that then we can go to Amazon and we can say,
somebody else, yeah.
We haven't done it for Amazon, but look, we've done it for these companies and we did it because we've gone through this and we can measure the outcomes. So that would be my takeaway on that.
Right. I agree with Juliette and Will. I think being able to deliver something tangible from a business outcome perspective is important. Let me give you an example. I mean, the way I would like to share my experience with you is that I'm actually two different persons sitting here. I'm a gamification practitioner, but in an alternative universe, I could have been a CEO that you're trying to sell gamification to. Because prior to founding SelfDrvn, I was running a tech company with 400 people. And I actually self-taught myself gamification because I want to solve my own engagement problem. If I haven't taken that step, I'll be sitting here asking you to pitch gamification to me. So let me give you a tip on what goes on in the CEO's head, right? I will give it to you straight. First and foremost, learning without performance is not a business, it's a university. Engagement without performance, it's pampering. So what CEOs really care about is how do you translate everything you say into performance. And performance can be defined very simply as 3 things, only 3 things. If it doesn't fall into these 3 things, the meeting is over. I don't want to talk to you as a CEO, right? Either you tell me for what you are trying to do with gamification, you can explain it to me in the terms of increased revenue, reduced cost, or better compliance to lower my business risk, then I will buy gamification from you.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That makes sense. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. I would be quite keen on seeing if you have. Yes, we have a question over there. And then we have another question over here. So again, I could see the value here of what is being shared here from your experiences for other people. And let's see what else we can...
Well, I have a question for Mr. Lam, because you told me you are interested when it's about, the 3 items you just mentioned. But what about employee engagement? What if that helps to engage the people more?
I think we have gone through the learning the business, in running a business, we have learned that in some kind of business like ours, where knowledge and collaboration and innovation and initiative is important, and part of our team's job very often is to make decisions on a daily basis. So they have to be engaged to do those things right. Right? So we understand as business owner, as CEOs, that engagement is important. But having said that, through my own interactions with other companies and all that, I have seen companies with highly engaged workforce that doesn't translate to better business performance. So in my view, engagement is important as part of the process, but the end goal is always about how do we improve business outcomes first. Secondly, I think as a CEO running a company in the knowledge-based economy, if you like to call it, or in an Industry 4.0 world, it's also in your interest to make sure that your employees are successful. But success has to be defined in a way that is also relevant to the business, you know. So I hope that answers your question.
I'm guessing that one of the things here that again, seeing it like a bit from the outside, is you're talking about two things that are steps. Because employee engagement is actually a step that you're looking for to get something else. Yep. And what the CEO is looking for is the business performance. Of course, if you can relate one to the other and explain how the employee engagement is going to move the needle in the other side, maybe that's exactly what the CEO would be looking into in this case.
I could give you an example. One of our clients, a multinational global consulting company, they try really hard in making sure that there is a good employee experience, and they get very high engagement scores every year. But they still talk to us because despite the high engagement scores, they have fairly high employee turnover. So that engagement score, it's a proxy indicator of something else, but it's not necessarily the business outcome that you want.
We had another question over here, Vasilis. Thank you very much for being the person to bring the microphone from one side to the other.
Hi. So first of all, I totally agree with Munch, and that's something that came up earlier with the rise of playful experiences. Aren't we falling into the danger of gamification becoming fuzzy again? Yeah. Because League of Serious Play is we all see the value in it, but for a CEO that is totally focused on results, it's hard to prove that it has actual results. So, and with that, I'd like to segue into asking Juliette, particularly in your learning, it's easy. Well, I wouldn't say it's easy, but there are a lot of platforms tackling the e-learning medium and making e-learning process more engaging and more challenging. But in what way are you connecting it to the bottom line, to performance itself? Are you able to measure performance of the employees before introducing your platform and after introducing your platform? Because what I see that gamification can bring into the equation is actually making learning measurable and being able to measure the impact of what you're introducing into the process.
I mean, I think we've obviously been trading now for about 14 years, so we have a lot of data to support the more learning people do, the more profitable, particularly in the area of sales. But I would also say, by the same token, that sometimes it's not necessarily about immediate return on investment. So for many of our clients, they're doing culture transformation projects. So BT, for example, would be a good example of a business that is going through huge amounts of change, and it's basically trying to communicate out a whole different way of basically managing their business, and that needs to be done consistently across the globe, in 25 different languages or whatever. And so to filter that down is going to take a long time. We also have platforms out there, for example, for L'Oreal, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a community where a community doesn't currently reside. So these people will be, selling L'Oreal products throughout travel retail, but they work in shift patterns, so they're not around their colleagues a lot. And so one of the things they're trying to do is they're trying to create global communities that feel local in order to discuss things that people that work for L'Oreal are passionate about, like beauty. So it's not necessarily these big, large chunks of e-learning. It's actually about creating, a learner community that is passionate and engaged and wants to learn, so that ultimately it does trickle down to the bottom line. One of the frustrations that, there is in learning is, that learning happens in a moment in time. One piece of SCORM e-learning is going to go out there and it's going to transform everybody's, idea of fishing. So we were talking to GSK about 6 months ago. They spent 2 million quid rolling out a global program for anti-phishing, and then they got a third-party university to come in and basically measure the effects of this piece of, this learning. And what they found is absolutely zero change in the pattern of people's behavior. And the reality is that whether it's manual handling or whether it's, security or whether it's GDPR, we as human creatures, don't have one learning moment and then we are transformed. It is about creating, a community of learners that basically can show how they're applying that learning and all of that kind of stuff. And that's where I think gamification can come in, because it allows people to be rewarded and be part of a community over a period of time. So, yeah.
Could I just add? I think it also comes down to the metrics again now. So one of the things that we found, I'm sure you found it as well, is that when you gamify training, what you quite often find is going back to your point about what are the three things. Well, cost comes into it. So what we found is that when we've done some work out in Australia with National Australia Bank, we found that people actually complete the training about 3 times faster than they would if it wasn't gamified. So there's a cost saving there that people are doing the training faster. There's also the piece then that they'll quite often do it in their own time. Okay, there's sometimes some interesting pieces around that, around people feeling compelled to do it, but people, if you give them the ability to do it on the bus on the way into work, in a fun way, they'll do it in that way. So you can still tie it to a bottom line. It could be sort of, cost saving in that way as well. So I guess it's picking your metrics to support your case. I think also the other thing that you touched upon about people not having a sort of single moment of learning, I think the other thing that gamification is really good at is the ability to, a lot of us will have been on some sort of classroom course where we're expected to take on loads of content in a really concentrated period of time, like you guys coming to this event for 2 days. How do you put it into practice? So where gamification is also really good is the ability to give people a burst of that learning content, but then actually drip feed extra gamified content as they get back into the swing of their jobs, okay? So they have the stuff they're supposed to learn, and then they literally maybe pledge to actually put that into practice. And again, gamification can be used to embed that as well. So again, you've got some cost savings in terms of the speed of the training, but also you've probably got a greater chance of that training being recalled and used because you're following it up with additional content and additional learning when they're back on the job. And
again, you do that training because it makes sense for the company.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not doing training just because. You're doing training because it makes sense for the company, for whatever. But one thing I wanted to jump into, and I've seen it as kind of a trend of what we've been talking about it as well, looking back on the other talks, is we're here at this conference. Many of us are into the gamification world already. So one of the main things that we might be asking ourselves after, of course, seeing how some things have failed and how can we stop failing, is what can we do, or what are you doing as well, to help move gamification forward into the future? So what do you think both what we can do, not in your place, but in our place, and what are you doing to help the industry move in the direction that we all want to?
I mean, I think as far as, our product development roadmap, it really is about delight and excite. So that's pretty much it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put as many gaming mechanics, into to act as options effectively. So we're not saying you need to use all of them, but what we want to do is have those learners to be delighted and excited. And we also want it to look really beautiful. So those are the types of things that we're doing. I think, the innovation in gamification in terms of the fundamental mechanics is absolutely vital, because let's say we've been working with EE for 5 years, Flight Centre for 7 years. You can't have the same gaming mechanics, and you can't expect the same things to work over and over again. So this is why it is very, very important for us to come up with new mechanics and new, ideas that, our global admins can use, switch on, switch off, in order to make that learning, journey compelling and exciting. I think also the other thing is where we take our steer from is very much consumer technology, and if the learners love it. So, we want the learners to turn around to the L&D department and go, wow, this is like the best thing. It's so much fun. It's really something that we love interacting with. Because if we can make them delighted and excited about learning, then it makes everybody's job a lot easier.
I guess I'd echo that as well, that it's constantly innovating and extending the raft of capabilities that you bring to bear. I would definitely agree with that. I guess the other thing is also, we talked this morning about the sort of slight thing that we come up against. I think it's I think somebody called it the shiny new things, isn't it? So all of a sudden gamification is old hat and it's all AI and it's blockchain. So I guess what it's about is making sure that we embrace those as technologies as well. So, I mean, certainly for us as an organization, we're already thinking about how AI can be used within our solution. So another use case that we've done in the past is, again, in a sort of marketing space, is where we've literally been able to create loyalty schemes where people walk around the city, they're near to a particular retailer and they get pinged a gamified offer for that particular retailer. So it's as simple as potentially applying AI to that. So if you've got maybe 6,000 possible offers that you could be giving somebody, it's about how you use AI to score and predict which of those offers might be the most appropriate one to present to any given marketer. So it's about, as you've said, making sure we continue to extend the range of capabilities, but also then adopting and sort of embracing new technologies as they come along.
And also, I mean, not to like pat ourselves on the back, but gamification comes from games, and games use AI every day since pretty long ago. So that's another thing that we need to incorporate and maybe show the value of that, the fact that it's there and that we're able to use it.
Right. My take is, I think for us to move forward, like I agree with Juliette and Will here. We should try to get rid of that whole idea that we sell gamification as a shiny new object. So hey, there's something new here. Look at this. I think the mistake that some of us have made in the past is we try to take people, the audience, out of their job into a game. And I think instead what we should be doing is putting the game into the job that they are doing every day, so that it's not intrusive. It doesn't stop you in your tracks because you need to pay attention to something shiny. It is just a better experience that you go through every day that engages you. Right? So I think we will be successful as an industry when gamification is so pervasive that people don't even know it's there.
That's great. Good reflection. That's one of the things. Absolutely. And again, it's bringing it back to the whole gamification, not just as a game mechanic, you dump in here, you dump in there. It's as a strategy that we've been talking about. Do we have more questions? Will over here, and then I can't see who that is, but there's somebody in the middle aisle as well with a question.
Yes, I've got a question, and I'm tapping into your last comment on bringing gamification so intrinsically in our daily lives that it makes everything pervasive. But to my mind, jumps the recent developments in China where you get points for being a good citizen. And it reads like an absolute horror story, which I'm not accusing you of being the brain behind the big Chinese point scheme.
The evil genius.
But I feverishly like to bring this sort of ethical side of our business into the conversation, if you permit me.
I think
it's an ongoing conversation.
I think the basic thing that we have to keep remembering is we put the player or the audience at the center of the game, rather than somebody else. And I think that the case in China is not done that way. Let me just put it right. So and that's where things go wrong. It becomes a system to control, to monitor, to manipulate. So it's not. It's a point system, but it's not good gamification.
So I think at the heart of good gamification it's all about a value exchange. Okay, so particularly in marketing, what we're trying to set up is these micro value exchanges whenever a consumer decides to engage with a brand. So we invite them in to engage, and we have to give them a reason to engage because gone are the days where a brand can just shout and tell people to do things. So that the value exchange can be just inherently making it more fun. We at 3 Radical believe that, as well as symbolic rewards that, the gamification purists would perhaps say you should purely rely on, we also mix real world rewards, so, there's a tangible benefit for that. So I definitely think that's at the crux. It's about that value exchange. Without that value exchange, then you're right. I guess the other thing is kind of interesting, where's he gone? I was talking to Pete at lunchtime about the ethical dimension as well. So as you'll hear in my talk tomorrow, we're actually going to talk about working with online gaming companies, and by that I mean pay-to-play gambling companies, which might be a few oohs and ahs and sort of sucking in of teeth at that point. But it is really about, I guess, a continuum, isn't it, gamification? So, you know, we work with some gaming companies, we work with some charities where they're still trying to drive people to spend money on a lottery, for example. So again, that's another part of the continuum. Continuing on from that, you could actually say that all marketing, where we're trying to use gamification to change behaviour, well, we're actually trying to change people's behaviour. But as long as the value exchange is in there, so if people engage and do what we want, and we give them something in return, then I think that's fair. And clearly, your example, where I guess perhaps staying out of a state prison in China is the value exchange there, probably not quite so fair. So that would be my take on it.
You have any comments?
I mean, I would just say, gamification is kind of like sugar. We all need sugar to live, but if you eat a lot, you're going to get diabetes and die. So it's a question of how you apply the mechanics, the gaming mechanics, rather than the mechanic itself. I mean, there's nothing inherently good or bad about gamification. It is how you apply it.
Again, not to jump in, but I always use the example of a hammer is an incredible thing to build a house. You can't build a house, well, at least some years back, without your hammer. But you can take that same hammer, I can stand here and break her skull. It's something I don't want to do, but some people do that.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I just want to say thanks.
I don't have one.
Can we swap seats?
Gracefully. But we can do exactly the same thing with many, many, many tools and strategies and things. There is an intent behind it, and Anjay is somewhere around here. He also has a commitment and the ethics code that he wrote, which I invite you all to read it, and I pledge to it. But in general, it's the intent is very important, and of course, there's also always the next step that we have to take into consideration. The next question was last question. Okay, well.
Okay, small question. I'm really interested in making the business case to CEOs, the gamification business case, and you mentioned 3 points, like how to increase revenue or reduce cost, and there was another point, and I didn't hear it.
Lower risk.
No risks.
Lower risk.
Lowering the risk.
Lowering business risk.
Okay,
Legal.
Right.
That was an easy one.
Yeah.
3 points.
Yeah. I think it was just on the same point that you mentioned. So you going to CEOs and talking to them and trying to say this is useful and giving them a business case. I wonder if we should maybe challenge the gamification community here, asking what if we actually invited the CEOs to actually use gamification to actually get them to think about what do you really want? I mean, apart from those 3 things, right? Because then only if you want it to get pervasive, then only will it get pervasive. And I think it's the job of us as consultants or whoever that is to basically raise the banner of gamification and say, this is what we think we should be going, and that also talks about ethics and all, rather than saying, what should we do for you?
So I'm going to be controversial here. I completely disagree with that.
I love that.
So
controversial part.
You've got to start with you said it. If it's not one of these 3 things, you've got to start with what the company's trying to achieve. Is it in marketing? Is it trying to acquire more customers? Is it trying to cross-sell more to them? Is it try to retain them? So. And absolutely, gamification could be techniques to deliver that, but you've got to be laser focused on that business goal. So absolutely, you can weave in gamification. You can use whatever language you want, but unless you've got a very clear picture of what you're trying to deliver, and then you frame it in whatever language is going to be appropriate for that person with the outcomes that they're looking for, your project's not going to succeed. So sorry if that sounds a bit harsh, but that would be my take.
Just to give it the small, and I'll give you the both of you. There's what the client needs and what the client wants. You have to always find a balance for the two.
Yeah.
I think also the other thing is, we work in the learning development space, and, we have, inherited in learning tech from, the classroom arena that people are being educated if they turn up. So we have this idea of, basically if you can run a SCORM report, then we know we've done our job. And I think one of the challenges that the L&D industry has as a whole is, they are told that their job is to train people. They're not told their job is to increase performance. And so we have a lot of learning technology out there, and many serious games that are ticking that box of yes, people have been
Showing
trained,
up, yeah.
but the performance is not, that dial is not moving up. So I think what people say they want and actually what that business needs, sometimes there's clear blue water. So, you can turn up and have a conversation with L&D professionals. They'll go, I need an LMS. I need a really, really exciting, gamified experience to pull my people through. But actually, that's not what they need. What they need is they need a set of learning to turn into a new set of behaviors. And that's a whole different,
And you've been talking about the university. I work at a university, and I do think that there's many things that we can and should change. So definitely, we can improve and we can go forward. I think our timing is up, and Michiel is.
Was the hint that clear? Okay.
So thank you very much to the panel. Thanks to you for bearing with us. It's been a pleasure, at least for me.
Thank you, Rob, Will, Stuart, and Rob.
Hey Engagers, it's fantastic to have you around. This podcast only makes sense with you, so let's connect on Twitter. That way you can let me know who would you like to have as a guest, what questions do you have, what can we change on the podcast, what can we help you with? You can find my Twitter account in professorgame.com/Twitter. I'm always sharing content on gamification, especially regarding education. You don't want to miss next week, so subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.